Hello, everyone, and welcome to our June Higher Education Tableau User Group meeting. We have started recording the meeting, and we will be sharing that link with everyone after the meeting so you can catch up on anything you might have missed. Announcements are our first item on today's agenda. So we want to encourage you to come off mute if you have anything you'd like to announce, or if you have any job openings you'd like to share, you can put the link in the chat. We also have an open positions page in our Slack group for anyone who's not a member of our Slack group. I encourage you to join. It's a great group, very helpful. And Roshi's putting those links in the chat box as we speak. I do want to share an announcement about a new Tableau user group that started up. It is an LGBTQ tug, Data Pride. And you can join their hub group and sign up for their first meeting. And I believe Roshi's putting those links in the chat as well. So today we've got a pretty packed agenda. First, we're going to have our Meet a Community member for the month. That is going to be Lydia Sholey Cotton from Queen's University in Canada, followed by Anna Koroniotis from Duke, who is going to share her viz of the day, Don't Pass on the Grub, and talk about her inspiration and how she built that viz. And then Roshni and I are going to continue our measures, dimensions, and calcs, oh my, part 2, continued from May's meeting. And then we'll have a wrap up and chat about our summer plans. All right, so I guess we will just jump right in. We don't have time to waste. Lydia, how are you today?
I'm doing really well. How are you doing?
I'm great. So a little bit about Lydia. You may remember her from a few months ago when she did a presentation for us. She is a senior research and planning analyst and is also a member of the Faculty of Arts and Science at Queen's University. She's got 2 decades experience working with higher education data. She was previously at Michigan State, Cornell, and the University of Miami. She's finishing her MED at the University of Toronto.
I'm done.
You're done. Awesome.
I'm done. I finished.
Wonderful. I didn't even think that graduation had happened since the last time we chatted about your bio. Well, congrats. And then you also have 2 children, a few pets, and an academic spouse. And in your spare time, you enjoy being active, traveling, and spending time with family. So, if you do recall, I'm going to just have like an interview going on here, and then we'll finish up with a lightning round. So the first, I'm just going to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your role and your team.
Sure. So I am a spouse of an academic. So if there's any spouses of academics, you understand that you move around a lot. So this is great because I get to experience new people and new places and new universities. It's also challenging because you have to move to new people, new places, and new experiences. But I recently finished my master's in higher education at the University of Toronto, and it was a fantastic experience. I really liked it a lot. It was a great opportunity to connect with other people who are interested in higher education and just expand my knowledge area in that area. And the pandemic has been hard. I think it's been hard on everyone, and I'm just really excited about being able to connect in 3D with people, even though it gives me a little bit of anxiety, honestly, and being able to travel around a bit. And then in regards to my role at Queen's, I work within the Faculty of Arts and Science. I'm a team of 1, which I think a lot of us analysts are. But I do work closely with other people within the university. So I showcase with Alicia in the Faculty of Engineering, and I work closely with our institutional research and planning group. And also the Tableau community is fantastic because we're so open to sharing what we're doing and different ideas that we have. And working at different institutions, you really get to know that while every university is unique, they really aren't. So that's also fun to kind of like just be able to take the data and mesh it and show it how other universities are showing it as well.
What type of data do you work with?
So I work with all sorts of data. So that's kind of the one fun things about my role is it's constantly evolving. So I started off just working with student data, and then we started incorporating financial data and building it into our model that we have within our faculty. We also bring in space data, and that's one of the great things about Tableau is you can easily incorporate and bring different data sets together and help showcase how they're connected or where there's deficiencies within the connections across data.
So you sort of started to answer the next question, which is how do you use Tableau at work?
Yeah, so I started using it in 2017, so I'm fairly new, I feel like, compared to other people. And I don't actually have a coding background or an IT background, but I'm fairly good at just Googling and picking things up myself. And honestly, I found the application was kind of it was hard to learn at first. But once I got rolling, it became more intuitive and I understand it more. And most recently, I've started using Tableau Prep. Actually, within the last week, I've been scared of it, honestly. But I was able to as data people, we know that how you have your data set up is really important for how you're going to visualize it. And I've been doing that, transforming elsewhere in other applications. And I thought I should just try it there. And within this last week, I did that and I was able to create some cool Sansky diagrams, which was really I was like, oh, it worked. It was so exciting.
That's awesome. I've always wanted to make one. Have yet to do it though. So do you have a favorite Tableau project that you've worked on?
I think my favorite of within the last few years has been the one with Alicia, just collaborating within the faculties and having different sets of eyes on it, a different focus has been really rewarding. And then seeing how other people across the universities use it and how we can just modify it a little bit to be more helpful has been really, so that's been my favorite project so far.
I think you'll notice in the chat later that you're not alone in your fear of Tableau Prep.
Yes.
You have some others in the audience who are definitely feeling you there. So you've already answered part of the next question, which is how long you've been using Tableau. So how did you learn to use it?
Honestly, I was replacing somebody the role, and they only had the Tableau desktop, and I just jumped in and started using it. And then I took a in-person course in Toronto for a week, which was helpful, kind of, because they always use sales data, which is very different from the data that we're used to working with. But yeah, I think it was just getting used to using it, and now I honestly use it almost every day. Just even bring in I find it easier than bringing it into Excel or other applications. I just can quickly pull things up and look at them, and it's really fantastic.
Do you have a favorite Tableau feature?
My favorite I really like the parameters, just so that when I tend to, so I know when we make dashboards, we make them for different levels of users, but my users are all different levels. So I tend to have a filter it's a parameter on that they can switch high level, mid level, or more detail. And I think that might be my favorite one so far.
That is a really nifty idea. I like it. Do you have a Tableau calculation that you use the most, or one that's your favorite?
I've been using the fixed one a lot recently because we're getting there, but we don't quite have a data set institutionally that we can connect to. So we pull the data ourselves, which is really feels really old school. But the having just one file that you're pulling from whatever software you're pulling from makes that function itself allows you to easily grab just one record at a time or grab the max record or whatever.
Yeah, the LODs are really helpful.
Yeah.
Is there one thing you'd like to learn more about in Tableau?
I'm the server administrator, and I feel like there's a lot on the server that I could be doing that would help my users. One other feature that I really love on the server is when I share, I allow my users to save their filter settings, and then they can talk to each other and save it. And I have to say that's a really nice feature to be able to say, oh, just do this and then send them a link and it goes to their email. I think that's, but I would like to learn more about like how to incorporate and better use the server.
That's something I do not know much about myself either. So what is one thing you wish you could go back in time and tell Tableau newbie you?
I think I think to just jump in and start doing stuff on the side. So for my classes that I took for my master's, I downloaded open data sources and started publishing things. It was really fun. It was funny because some of the stuff that I did it like within 5 minutes, just quickly did put together a dashboard and everyone's like, wow. And you're like, oh, but I know newbie me would have taken a little bit longer to do it. So I think just jump in, start using it, try to use it a little bit every day. And you become more comfortable with it.
Do you ever use Tableau outside of work?
Yeah, so I used it for my master's program. For a couple of papers that I did, I downloaded some data sources and made some pretty visualizations for the papers. And I tried to do, so I was getting more, I'm trying to learn more about qualitative data and representing qualitative data. So I was trying to bring in some of the text and showcasing it, but I was stumbling a little bit. So I'd like to be able to do that a bit more.
Is there anything else you want to share before we?
No, I really, I love the Tableau community, and I think that, I think it's so fantastic how we share what we're doing and showcase what we're doing as a community, because I think a lot of us analysts tend to I think of myself as like a canary in a coal mine. So I tend to see, and I think a lot of analysts do, you tend to see the little spikes or things, and then you bring it to senior leadership. But it's nice to see that there's other people like us across the world.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And would you say that you are a team floating or team tiled?
Tile.
And are you more a fan of sets or parameters?
Parameters for sure.
Yeah, I thought you might say that. All right, well, we are ready for our lightning round if you are.
Yes, I'm ready. All
right, so French fries or poutine?
French fries, because I'm American. I'm not Canadian.
Understand, although I really did enjoy the poutine when I went to visit Montreal. So, all right, next up, beach or mountains?
Oh, beach for sure.
And hot dogs or hamburgers?
I'm torn, honestly. I'm not a big fan of McDonald's hamburgers, but I like them from home, and a hot dog when you're out grilling is fantastic.
I always like to have one of each. Watermelon or s'mores?
S'mores.
Lake Ontario or Lake Superior?
Lake Ontario. It's right by us.
That's a great vacation spot. Would you rather have a staycation or a road trip?
A road trip.
Fun. Do you prefer travel by plane or by train?
Oh, I like train.
Me too. And then last but not least, Pierre Trudeau or Justin Trudeau?
Justin Trudeau, for sure.
So for those of you not in the know, there's this magical thing that us Americans are potentially aware of the Canadian tuxedo. It's denim on denim, perhaps with more denim, and these are our two Trudeaus in their denim glory. So yeah.
I learned that just because of this lightning round. So that's it for our Meet a Community Member this month. Thank you, Lydia. And if anyone is interested in being our Meet a Community Member in the future, please reach out and let us know. We'd like to do one every month. All right, so I'll turn it over to Roshni then.
It helps if I actually remember to unmute. So we're going to continue our welcome to summer with some more interviewee stuff. But this time, we're going to have a viz to interview someone about. So Anna Kouraniotis, I hope I said that sort of close to right, from Duke University. She has presented with us at least once. I think she's been a Meet a Community member with us as well. And she offered last month when we were doing our Back to Basics fundamental session, she offered us a couple of videos that we just didn't have time for that were all about this viz that she had created called Don't Pass on the Grub. Well, turns out that viz actually became a Tableau public viz of the day. So we're gonna take this time to actually bug Anna a little bit. Bug, get it? Sorry, I had to.
I love it.
Excellent. A little bit about her viz, how she got inspired to create the viz and what her process was. And then we're going to play a couple of those videos because Anna's also not supposed to be talking very much this week, but she's graciously allowed us to bug her with some questions. So let's go ahead and just take a look at the viz first, and let's see how this works. Can I full screen? Full screen. Full screen? Oh, not full screen. There we go. Something very bad just happened. All right, there we go. So tell us about this viz.
All right. Thank you, Roshni. And as Roshni mentioned, I am experiencing some vocal challenges this week. So please do excuse my cracking of the voice if it does happen. So this is Don't Pass on the Grubs. This is a visualization that I created because I wanted to do something fun, and it's a rare opportunity when I do get to work on Tableau stuff outside of work. So I tried to kind of incorporate the things that I find interesting, mostly that are kind of like surrounding my son. So this is what inspired the viz initially was that I had been watching some documentaries about insects with my 3-year-old, and it sparked my interest to learn more about these fascinating creatures. That and my discovery of this show called Naked and Afraid. If people know about it, it is where two strangers try to survive in the wild for 21 days naked. And in almost every episode, there are people who resort to eating termites or ants, sometimes even tarantulas. And it was at that moment that I know, totally. It was then that I realized or thought of researching a little bit about entomophagy, which is the practice of eating insects. So this, the visualization that Roshni is kind of scrolling through, it's built using kind of like a movie poster theme. I love movie posters. There's something so cool about them. And I decided to like use different techniques, different graphs to make things kind of interesting, the stacked bar graphs, the kind of like the lollipop charts. I use some parameter actions to filter on the, like as Roshni's showing here, you click on the country and it shows you the bugs or the insects that most people eat in that country. And there are, I think, a total of, how many are there? Like 7? Yeah, 7 different buttons that you can press on to answer a specific question, like who are the naysayers, who are people who are unwilling to eat insects across the world, and who are the ones who are most willing to. And so this is this example here. It's looking at it's using a Likert scale, and it's actually 2 views. I decided to do it this way because like the bigger view, or rather the view that contains like that larger list of countries and the average scores on who is willing or not willing to eat insects. That's separate from the larger view, which is highlighting Mexico. I did that on purpose in order to highlight that Mexicans are the most willing to eat insects. And there is a whole story behind that. They have a tradition actually. And the Italians, I think, are the least willing. I guess they prefer pizza over cockroaches, but you know, it's a preference.
To each their own, right?
Yes, exactly.
All right. So can you walk us through the process of creating this viz? Like, so did you create mock-ups? Did you have people test out different versions?
Yes, I'm very happy to do that. I'm actually going to share my screen momentarily. So what I usually do is I start off on basically paper and pen. And let me make sure that I'm sharing the right screen here. Is everyone seeing the PowerPoint?
We're seeing the PowerPoint, not the presentation view.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm not going to switch it up presentation. So I usually start on pen and paper. But you know, unfortunately, in this instance, my son grabbed he grabbed a hold of my papers, and I had to chuck him. He made a mess.
He was trying to help with spring cleaning.
Yeah,
Come on.
you know, he does. He has a tendency to just be present all the time and take over everything that mommy does. And I'm sure other parents in the room, whether you have a humanoid or a pet baby, you know, this stuff happens. So, after jotting stuff down, drafting on paper and pen, I'm actually go to PowerPoint where I try to kind of organize things visually. And this was like the 5th attempt. So this is a very basic idea representation of that poster that I ended up layout wise with. And surrounding like the main visual, which I typically do my visuals either in canva.com or Photoshop. It all depends on what kind of graphics I'm using. And so I started with this, and then I just, start researching. This is the list of all the sources that I used in order to get the data, which I compiled in a single Excel workbook. And then I start going through like, what are the most important pieces, right, that I want to focus on to answer each of these individual questions on the poster. So I start making notes on like the most important, the highlights that I want to kind of embed. And then
how are you telling your story? Like, what story are you telling about to answer each of these questions, right?
Yes. I'm sorry. Was that a question?
No, I was just comment.
Okay, so you're reading it. Okay. So this is basically all of these questions are supposed to align into a single story, which is, hey, why not think about all the benefits that there are about regarding eating insects. All these things are kind of like focusing around that story. Yeah. And I tend to work incrementally. So before I reach the big picture, I tend to do the research first and then tackle kind of smaller topics and somehow try to amalgamate them into like a single story. That's it.
Cool. So, you mentioned like your data process goes through some iterations, and how did you figure out when you finally had the visualization done? How did you figure out that you were done? Like, what got you to that point?
I shared a couple of drafts that I made with 2 close friends and my husband, and their feedback really helped in determining whether or not they got a solid understanding or the big picture of what I was trying to portray. And at that point, I kind of thought I was done. And also it's also a matter of timing. I kind of, when I start on something, I always have to have I set myself a deadline of like how many hours or weeks or months or whatever I want to dedicate to this thing that I'm doing. It works more so on a personal level than it does for work, because for work, sometimes we have more stringent deadlines and, you know, you only have like, I don't know, 2 days or like 2 months to work on something. So when I had a complete piece, which I like to look in terms of like an artwork, right? So I had my canvas, and that canvas had multiple layers on it. And folks had, you know, some things to say about it. And kind of like, as soon as I saw it kind of, you know, mold together, then I decided that it was ready to be published. After, of course, I like looked at it tens of times to check for like spelling errors, or, you know, alignment. And in this particular visualization, I actually did everything floating. So there are no tiles on this thing, which originally, like, I know, Rashni. I remember a few months ago when you interviewed me, I was like all about team tile, but now I have to say I'm a believer in anything that floats. You can, you know, pun may be intended here. Floating rocks. Brian says that. Brian O'Connor, thank you. I know, it's like I thought I was all about the structure, but there is structure, and there is a lot of you have the ability to control your pixels here more so than tiles. And it doesn't always, you know, it doesn't always make sense, but for this particular format and end result, it just kind of worked for me.
Fine. I'll let you be on team floating. So what did you find most challenging about the viz or the process of creating it?
Oh, yeah. So let me see. I think, can you click on which bugs are popular, Roshni? That one, is that the one? Yes. Okay. So the most challenging part was finding a smart way to plot the different bugs into a single dashboard. So what you see in front of you is actually multiple views. And I've hidden it on purpose. See, you're hovering over it. That's sneaky. You're hovering over it to try to like read the tooltips, but there's actually an invisible blank layer that is on top of all of these different views. And let me I'll show you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just show you what that looks like. Share screen. This one. Okay. So where is, which bugs are popular? You see what's happening here. So I removed the blank object that I had there before, right? It was right on top of everything. That's why when you hover, you don't see anything. So my original pain point here was trying to put all these little suckers together in a single dashboard and retain this layout. But I didn't know how to do that when I, you know, shortly before I published this dashboard. So all of these little bugs are actually in separate views. And I played around manually with the sizing to create that effect of, you know, which one's bigger based on the percentage. And yeah, it was a little lazy of me, but it was like a quick and dirty approach. And granted, I only did this because I know that I won't be updating this thing anytime soon, unless I feel like looking at more data. But, you know, and I thought about this at the last minute. I didn't have to implement it in a smart way. The smart way would have been to use a background map and apply latitude and longitude values to each bug in the data source, and then fill out the attributes in the background image page itself. And this is something that I Googled later on. I did implement it for another little project, so it does work. So this was Anna being a little lazy and short on time to justify it slightly.
I mean, like you said, this isn't something that you're going to be updating very frequently, and you really don't need people to actually go in there and get anything from what would have been tooltips, right? So,
right.
So it makes sense that that's the case. So what did you find most rewarding about this whole experience? I mean, you did become a Tableau Viz of the Day award winner.
That was a good one. I like getting that email. So that was like super duper fun to join that group of people. Even though in my view, there's really not overly complicated data analysis happening over here. It's all about the visual and telling the story in a fun and interesting way with a lot of facts in using different methods of Tableau to represent that. So from the different charts to the parameter actions and all that stuff. So that part I really enjoyed. I think the most rewarding part of the overall experience is sharing the viz with my friends and my colleagues and seeing their reaction. So a really good colleague of mine was blown away by the facts. And then she told me that, oh, Anna, you have forever ruined peanut butter for me, because there's like 30 insect fragments per 100 grams of peanut butter. And that's just great. Thank you for destroying my love for peanut butter. So that was actually really funny.
I mean, every food you eat is probably going to have some sort of insect in it, right?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I find, I get lettuce and things from like the farmer's market, and there's like tons of little spiders and like, tiny little flies in there. So
Totally
it's okay.
grossing me out.
It's additional protein.
I'm really glad that I ate hours ago and not immediately before this. All right. So is there anything else that you want to tell us about your viz?
No, but I thank you so much for allowing me to share this. Thanks again to like the entire community for just participating in so many different ways. This is actually really the only way that I am able to learn and kind of force myself to learn more about Tableau, which I really, absolutely adore. I wish I had more time in my day-to-day work environment to work with this even more. But so this is a great opportunity to do so.
Well, thank you for coming on here, telling us about this viz. And we're not done with you yet. I mean, we're done with you, so you can rest your voice now.
Thank you.
But we have those videos that you put together for us a little while ago. So we're gonna watch both of these videos. I'm gonna cross fingers that all of the audio works right, and you guys should tell me in the chat if it doesn't. So the first video is all about how to use navigation buttons and how Anna used those in this viz to get between the different, answer each of those different questions. So let's get that started.
Hi there. In this pre-recorded session, I will illustrate a really cool and easy thing that you can do with navigation buttons. So what you see here is a visualization that I created recently. It's got kind of like a poster theme, and it uses multiple navigation buttons to change the different sections or to help the user navigate to the different topics on the poster. So for example, if I click on who is already munching, then you see that we're taken to a different dashboard here. And the currently active dashboard is the one with the title who is already munching. And everything else, as you can see, is grayed out, right? Once you start clicking on things, different topics that you're taken to, all the elements within it are changing depending on the subject matter, right? And then you can always go back to the main poster and see the navigation buttons from the very beginning. So you see that they're black, right? Inactive buttons indicate an inactive page that the user can visit. The orange button is indicative of the page that the user is currently in. So how do we make this happen? I'm going to go over to the desktop version, click on my first and main dashboard. That's where everything kind of begins. So what I did is I chose to go all floating with this one. So all objects here are floating. It gave me tremendous flexibility in terms of alignment. And that's not to say that it's not pixel perfect, because it is. You can use the position marks and the size on the left-hand panel here under layout to make things really pixel perfect. So how did I make this happen? First of all, you start with a wireframe on how you You want everything on your dashboards to be laid out, and I'm following the same structure all throughout. As I click on this button, for example, see, it takes me over to the who is already munching page, right? So this is the general concept. So how do we do this? I will start from scratch. I'm just going to get rid of this button, bring it back in, right? So again, as I mentioned previously, I'm choosing a floating object, bringing in navigation. Now, I already have my buttons ready here. They're stored in a specific folder for this project, and I've got 3 different versions for each button. An orange one, which pertains to the activated page, the gray one, which is the inactive page, and the black one, which is only on that very first, let's say, title page, right, or index page, which is the beginning of my movie poster. So that said, I click on More Options, Edit button. I can start off by selecting the navigation, so the final, the source rather, and where I want my user to be navigated over to. So for the who is already munching, it is this one. The button style will change from text to image. I will go and select the image. In this case, I am going to go with the black version since I am already on the title page. Click on open, right? You can go ahead and you can customize your tooltip. If a user hovers over it, you can put something, more specific than that, but I'm just going to keep it as is. Background set to none, border none, because this is an image that I want to retain as it was created. So click on OK, and then you see, so the navigation by default, right, it's got a specific size to it. And because I want mine to be a little bit larger for better viewing, I will go ahead and change that to the customized one, which has a width of 280 and a height of 113. Go and enter those values there, and then 113. And I will position it just about here. But I know that, because I've built this previously, I know that the position is very specific, and just going to go back to that second page to find the position number here. There we go. XY is 584, 660. I'm going to go ahead and plug that in. 584 and 660 for the Y coordinate. Enter. Now it's pixel perfect. Right, so you get the concept here. It's pretty easy. You just have to be aware of which dashboard you are in. If this is the dashboard that is currently active, then the respective title, so to speak, has to be an orange color, and then all others have to be grayed out. Right, so in this one, who are the yay sayers? This button is the grayed out version of this topic, basically. Right? So you get, it's a little bit of a time-consuming, let's say, process, depending on how many different navigation buttons. I have a lot here. There are 7 you have. And remember, it's 7 times 3 different colors. And, it works out well, though, because I think that it adds that kind of interactivity, which is always pleasant for the user. And that's it. Navigation button. Easy thing to kind of to do depending on what it is that you want to have as an end result. Hi there. In this pre-recorded session, I will illustrate.
So that was the first video on how those navigation buttons were set up. Now we're going to watch one other video about how filter actions were set up. Warning in advance, the audio on this might be a little low, so you may have to turn up your sound, turn it up to 11 perhaps. Here we go.
Welcome to another pre-recorded session on Tableau tips. So this time I'd like to show you a really cool way of adding an effect when you're hovering over a specific element. So as you see, as I'm hovering over the different countries here, I not only get that tooltip, but also an image at the very top, right? So for Africa, in Africa, as stated here, grasshoppers are consistently eaten. So you hover over there, you see the little grasshopper. You go over Australia, you see the termite, Mexico caterpillar, so on and so forth. So how do you do this in Tableau? How do you get this wonderful, cool effect? You use something called an action. I'm going to show you really quickly where that action lives. Now to do this, you actually need to have two worksheets with the data, right? The first one is the worksheet that you do the action over, the hovering over. The second one is the source, right? So you're on the dashboard right now. You click on the dashboard menu, go to actions. You see that, well, there are two actions here, but the one that we are going to look at specifically is the action on filter country for bugs. I'm going to click on that, go to edit, right? And what I'm seeing here is the following. So I gave the action a specific name. I select what the source sheet is, which is the sheet labeled already munching country. So this sheet is actually the one where the country images are shown. Run action on hover. So every time I hover over a country, right, I see the image of the bug on the top, and the target sheet is the sheet labeled already munching bug. So when the user goes away from this image, so they leave the hover, the selection is clearing all of the values. So you're excluding all of the values and the dashboard just starts fresh. All right, so now we're going to go through how to do this kind of step by step. So this is the end result. We went through what the action item is already, but how do you do it from scratch? First of all, I'm going to click on this first sheet, right? So this is the worksheet that contains the different countries, and when you're hovering over, you see that tooltip there. On the second sheet, and this is the dashboard where both of these sheets are actually stored and viewed. That second sheet is going to be the source sheet. Or excuse me, this sheet is going to be the target sheet. Okay, and then this one is going to be the source sheet. So going back to the target sheet, you see that all of these different insects that when you hover over the country, they become visible. There is no filter on the insects themselves, which is what we want, right? Because the filter is actually going to be added when the action is taken on the source sheet. So, and again, this is the source sheet. So what I did is on this dashboard, I actually used floating tiles to insert both of these objects here. And the reason I did so is because it gives me a little more flexibility on position. So right now, if you hover over these countries, nothing happens. So the target sheet is actually not updated, right? And if I go ahead and I open this up a little bit, you see all of the different options here. I'm going to undo that because I do want the size of this tile to be as it is. So how do I add the action? Go to dashboard, click on actions. Create a new action, type filter. Give that action a name, filter bugs, based on country. It could be anything really, right? And now, under source sheet, you will select the already munching country. I'm going to click on hover, but you can also do a selection, right? So you can have the user kind of clicking on the country and then having that target worksheet being updated. And I'm going to keep it on hover just to go by the example that I showed you earlier. And then the target sheet is going to be the one that contains the bugs, right? So deselect that other sheet first. And then clearing the selection, you would want to exclude all values so as to start from scratch. All right, so you don't need to select anything under the filter option here. Click OK. Click OK again. Hover over the different countries. And there you have it, a really cool filter action that allows you to view a specific image when hovering over another image in the source sheet. Thank you.
All right,
Welcome to another
Whoops.
pre-recorded session on
let me close that
Tableau
tab.
tips.
So those are the two videos that Anna put together for us. And again, thank you for both talking to us about your viz and for putting together those videos. If you have any questions for Anna, go ahead and put them in the chat or put them in Slack and we can, use Slack for post-meeting conversation around this viz. So let's move on. Also earlier in the chat, I put in Anna's links for her, both the visualization as well as all of her like social and Tableau public stuff. I'm just posting those one more time. So yeah, so thanks again, Anna. And we're gonna move on to our pre-networking time, or pre-breakout room time. So Ginny and I, last month, back in May, we started the first of what will probably end up being at least a few sessions on Tableau calculations. If you missed last month's, the video is on the May event page, which I just put a link into. So last month we talked about some string calculations and some type conversion and a couple of basics there. This time we're going to talk about more calculations. But before we get into calculations, we want to underscore something very important from last time. And that is that sometimes calculations can be very complicated. And you know what makes it easier to step into complex calcs? How about some custom Tableau Data Plus Love shoes? So Ginny not only designs a cool viz, but she also designs a cool shoe. And we just had to show this because it's a pretty amazing shoe and a pretty amazing GIF. So that's all. Now on to Tableau. It is a pretty cool viz. I'm gonna stop sharing, Ginny, if you want to share the Tableau.
Bringing it up now.
Awesome. All right. So back before we get into the calculations, we're going to pause a little bit and talk about the data pane a little bit more. So last time we talked about dimensions versus measures and where they live in the data pane. So the dimensions are above that little gray line in the middle, the measures are below it. And by default, within that organization, Tableau will put fields alphabetically by table in the data source. In this case, we only have one table in our data source, so it's pretty much just an alphabetical order. But generated fields like measure names and measure values and the count, the journals count, those all end up appearing at the bottom of their respective sections, not in alphabetical order. So here we have a pretty manageable number of fields, but in some cases you might end up having tens or 20s or hundreds of fields in your data source. I've had that happen many times, not a fan, but sometimes you can't get away with that. And one way to sort of make it easier to manage all of those fields is to use folders. So how do you add folders? So in the data pane, next to the view data button is that little triangle, the triangle of magic. And in that, you'll see right now that all the fields are grouped by data source table. We don't want that. Instead, when we put group by folder, that will let us use folders. In this case, again, we had only one table, so switching it to grouping by folders is absolutely nothing. But if you had multiple tables, you just see one big alphabetical list of dimensions and then one big alphabetical list of measures. So how do you now that we are grouping by folders, how do you add a folder? There's a few different ways. So one way is just right-click in the white space to create a folder. So if you just right-click there, you'll see create a folder, and then you can type in the name of the folder. Here, we're going to put all the journal status fields into a folder. So let's just name this folder journal status. And you can now right-click any field that you want to throw in there. So in our first case, that to journal status, we're going to right-click on it, and then near the bottom, you'll see a folders option. And we'll just do add to folder and go and put that into journal status. You can also click and drag. So journal status original, we're just going to click and drag that and put that right into that folder as well. You can also put measures and dimensions into the same folder. So here we want to put journal names and IDs into a folder because they're all sort of identifiers, right? So we're going to go ahead and right click on journal name and create a folder. So again, we go back to folders, and then instead of add to folder, we're going to click create to create folder, and then name this journal ID/name. So we have a folder for all of our journal IDs and names. And then that automatically puts that field that we had right clicked into that folder. The other ID type fields that we're thinking about here are row and journals count. So we're going to control click or command click or shift click if you have a big list. And then we can right click on that and add to folder the same way we did before, or we can click and drag them there. So there we go. That's how you create folders. And if you do have one of those data sources with hundreds of fields and probably many, many folders, you can, if you only want to see a few folders at a time, you can individually click on the arrows to make them collapse. Or if you go up to the very top next to view data, there's an option in that triangle menu to expand all or collapse all. So you can collapse everything and then uncollapse just the ones you want, or expand everything and then collapse the ones that you don't want to see, whatever works, just to sort of get a handle on navigating those folders. So that's folders.
I'm going to kick us off with contains, which is a string calculation. This can be used both in a static way and dynamically. So if you try to use contains with a number, it will not work. In order to use contains with a number, you would first have to convert it to a string like we did in May in our first calculations demonstration. So if you missed that, definitely go check it out. We're not going to get into that here. We're going to go on back to the example. So here are some comments from a survey. Now let's say I was asked to do a report for the athletics department and they wanted me to highlight any comments that mention football. We can do this with a contains calculation. So it's a really simple calculation. All you do is type the word contains followed by an open parenthesis, the field that you want to search, a comma, and then in quotations, because it's a string, the word we're searching for. So in this case, football. So we want to see if the comment field contains the word football. So if we put that out here in our viz, we can put it on rows and see that row 4 is showing true because it does contain the word football. I'm graduating in the spring and I will miss going to football games. So this is great. But what if you're not just doing the report for the athletics department? What if you're doing it for all the departments across campus and they want to search a lot of different words? We can actually build a parameter to meet this need and make our word search dynamic. So let's look at our parameter. We've named it word search. It is a string data type. The current value is left blank and we are allowing all values. So I'm going to right click and show parameter. Now, if I type in a word like class and hit enter, well, nothing happens. And that is, of course, because we have to write a calculation to bring our parameter into the viz in some way. So we're going to write a dynamic calculation. And essentially, it's the same calculation as before, except instead of putting the word football, we are putting our parameter. So we're going to look to see if the field named comment contains whatever word we put in our word search parameter. All right, so if I replace our previous calculation with that, and I'm also going to put it on color just so we can highlight a little bit more easily, we'll see that row 1 is showing true because it does include the word class in the comment. I could not get the classes I needed because they were all full. And I want to point out that it doesn't just search for the word class, which is what we put into the word search, but it looks to see if any part of a word includes what we put into our word search. So class, classroom, classes, all of those would come up with this particular word search parameter. You can also put it in the filter if you want to be able to show that way, an easier way of reducing the number of comments if you have a very large report with a lot of comments. That's it for the contains calculation. Now Roshi will take it away with replace.
So replace is another string calc. So just like with contains, you can only use it with numbers, but it goes a little bit beyond. It goes a step beyond perhaps what contains does. So contains searches for a string within another string. But what replace does is it takes that substring, the string that you're searching for, and it actually replaces it in your original search string. So let's look at these summer terms. The term names, they all use Roman numerals. We've got summer 1, summer 2, etc. But instead of the number 1 or the number 2, they use I or II. Roman numerals, especially in this font, can be a little hard to read. So we want to replace the I's or the Roman numeral 1s and 2s with numbers 1 and 2. So we're going to start by replacing summer 2 with the number, or with summer and then the number 2. So how we do this is by typing the word replace. So that's your function. And then in parentheses, you start with what's the term that you want to search within. And in this case, it's term name. And then we're going to take the substring that we're looking for, so summer II, and then we're going to replace that with summer number 2. And those are all in quotes and separated by commas. So now when we add this to the view, what we'll see is that all of the summer 2 fields, so like the even numbered rows here, are going to say summer number 2 and then the year. The summer 1 fields are going to stay exactly as they were before. It's summer I and whatever their year is. So that's one step in this process. We now have to replace the summer 1s with the summer number 1. So like most of these calculations, you can nest them, and that's exactly what we've done here. So again, we take that replace on the very top there, and then we put in parentheses, and in those parentheses, we start with what is the term that we are replacing. So here we've actually taken the exact same code that we used in that first example and put it right there. So that field, so the one that says summer 2 2022 or summer I 2022 for the summer 1 course, that's the field that we're going to look in. And in that field, we're going to look for summer I, which is that substring that we're looking for, and we're going to replace that with summer 1. So now if we add this field to the view, we'll see exactly what we want to happen. We'll see the summer 1s looking like summer 1. We'll see the summer 2s looking like summer 2, no Roman numerals in sight. And that is exactly what we wanted. But one thing to watch out with nesting is that it can go wrong, and it can go wrong really easily. So in this example that we're showing here, we actually went in the opposite order. We started with summer 1, replaced all the summer I's with summer 1, and then we looked for summer II and replaced those with summer 2. But when we add this one to the view, we'll see that that is not at all what we want to happen. So here, the summer 1s will look fine. They all say summer 1 and then the year. But the summer 2s, all, instead of saying summer number 2 or saying summer II, they all say summer 1I. And that's because when that outer replace looked for summer II, it found no summer IIs. Instead, what it had was a summer 1I. And that, because it didn't have a match with the summer II, it had nothing to replace. And so it left it exactly as it was. So we've mentioned this a few times. When you're doing complex calcs, do them step by step and add them to your view to check your work in between those steps. It can really help you find and fix errors very early in the game rather than after you're, multiple steps in and have a huge, mess to untangle, or perhaps to talk about shoes, maybe a knotted shoelace that you can't undo. All right.
I love your puns, Roshi. All right, so next we're going to look at if null, which is a logic calculation. And unlike the previous two examples, this can be used with both strings and numbers. So here we have a list of students. All of them have a legal first name, and some of them have a preferred first name. Let's say we're going to send out a survey and we want the invitation email to say the student's preferred first name, if they have one, or their legal first name if they don't. And we can do this using an if-null calculation. And this is a real example that I have used in the field relatively recently. So it's very simple. All we're doing is saying if null, parenthesis, and then the preferred first name. So if the preferred first name is null, then we want to use the legal first name. Otherwise, use the preferred first name. So if null, the preferred first name, comma, legal first name. And so now if we add that to our viz, we can see that it works exactly as we'd want it to. So in row A, Gina is the legal first name. It is also the preferred first name. And so Gina is what we will address the email to. In row B, Tiffany is the legal first name, but Tiff is the preferred first name, and therefore the email will go to Tiff. In row C, Elizabeth is the legal first name. There is a null for preferred first name, and so Elizabeth is who the email will go to, and so on and so forth. And that is just a real fast way to do if null. And now Roshni is going to show you how to do a zero null.
So what if all you wanted your if null to do was to make null numbers into zeros? There's a function for that. So here we have a list of terms and the number of students enrolled. And you'll notice that fall 2022 doesn't have a number. It is null. So on the next tab, we're going to look at the average counts of registered students for fall terms versus spring terms. If you leave that fall 2022 as empty or null, this is the average that you get. You get 109 students over however many, average over all of those semesters. And in this case, when it's null, the zero or the null gets ignored, and the count of semesters, or in the count of semesters, the fall term doesn't appear in that denominator either. The fall 2022 doesn't appear there. But what if you actually did want it to count as zero and you wanted it to appear in the denominator? Sometimes the difference between those two options, it really does matter. So we're going to look at what happens if you actually do count that as a zero. And to make a null number into a zero, all you do is put it in parentheses and start it with a ZN. So zero if null is basically what that ZN means. And so this is going to take that null and put a zero in its place. So when we now add that to measure values, we'll see two completely different numbers for average number of students registered. So for the spring term, it's the exact same. We had no nulls in the spring term, so we've got 121 students on average enrolled every spring term. But in the fall term, there's a pretty decent difference there. It's almost a 20% difference between when you count the fall 2022 term as zero versus having it be null. And while here, maybe not, it's still a 20% difference. But if you're thinking about things like financials or survey responses or things like that, using ZN could actually have a really meaningful difference in the actions that someone takes when they're using your dashboards, or what conclusions they reach by when they're looking at the data that you presented in your dashboard. So think about ZN as an option if you need to use it for making those null numbers into zeros. And now is null.
So is null is another logic calculation, and we're going to look at two different use cases, one using and one using or. So here we have 8 different students. Each student has a 1 if they were enrolled in the fall and a 1 if they were enrolled in the spring. But there are not zeros for the terms they were not enrolled. Instead, there are null values. So first, let's say you want to see students who were enrolled in only one term. So we are going to look at the or operator. So we're just going to say, is fall a null, or is spring a null? So if either of these return a true, then we'll know they were only enrolled in one term, and that's what we want to find out. So if I add that to the viz, we can see that row A is false because the student was enrolled in both terms. Same with row B, but row C is true because the student was only enrolled in one term in the spring. So what if you wanted to check and see if a student is enrolled in both terms? Well, you could look at this calculation and just know that false is a student who is enrolled in both terms, but you could also write a different calculation using and. So if the fall is not null, or if the is null is false and is null is false for spring, then we'll know that they were enrolled in both terms. I am not saying that this is the most effective or straightforward or best way to write this calculation, but for the sake of this example, it is going to do the trick. So if this returns true, then we know that they were enrolled in both terms. So if I replace our previous calculation there, we'll see that row A and B are both showing true because they're enrolled in both terms, and row C is showing false because they're only enrolled in one term. So I can also make this easier to read by adding our calculation to the color box, and then that will highlight who was enrolled in two and who was enrolled in only one term.
But hey, Jenny, those numbers are still kind of hard to read. Can you do something about that?
Absolutely. So when you add this color onto a text field, you'll notice it turns the text a certain color, but it's, like Roshi said, very hard to read. So you can actually change that to a square in your marks card, and that will put the color behind the text. This is still pretty hard to read though, because you need to increase the size, and then it will fill in more of the box. But you'll notice that it doesn't fill in the box completely, like end to end, top to bottom. So if you're a neat freak like me and you don't want it to start bleeding over into the other cells, there's a trick for that. You just double click in columns, put a double quotation mark and hit enter. Double click in rows, same thing. And then you just go and hide those headers so that you don't see those. And if you increase the size all the way to max, you'll have perfect squares filled top to bottom and left to right.
That was pretty cool. That is also one of my favorite tricks. It's something that I think I had used a long time ago. And then when Jenny and I were putting this together, she mentioned, I have some color magic. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And then I saw this, I was like, dude. So continuing with my dude, I'm going to channel more of snarky 90s me and also play Negative Nancy at the same time by introducing you to not. Not is my favorite logical operator. Not. So first, let's say we want to identify terms. We're looking at term codes. The first 4 digits are the year, and the fifth and sixth digits are the semester. So let's say we want to identify terms that are in 2022. So last time we created a calc to look at what the year is, and that's the one left year calc, which is, we're not actually going to show it. But in this calc, we're now going to just look for where is that year? Is it equal to 2022? So that's a simple logical, comparison. Is year equal to 2022? So when we add that to the view, we'll see that there are 2 terms that have a year of 2022, those first 2 that begin with 2022. That's exactly what we wanted, what we expected. But what if we wanted the opposite? We wanted to do something with the terms that are not 2022. So we want to look at current year versus past years. So there's a few different ways of doing that, and we're going to look at 3 of them. So my favorite right now, because, Negative Nancy and 90s me want to say not. So you just put a not in front of that whole calculation that we had in the is 2022 calc. So not year is equal to 2022. And when we add that to the view, we'll see that the values are pretty much the opposite of what we saw before. So we'll see false in the first couple rows and then true in all of the others. But because we're looking at equality, Tableau's calculation language, just like a lot of other programming languages, have a few different ways of negating an equals. One of them is this second option here, where you use a less than bracket and a greater than bracket to be not equal to. And then, Jenny just press the apply button and you saw absolutely no changes, which is exactly what we want because it's the same calculation. And then there's another way of doing a not equal to, and that is instead of putting an equal sign, putting an exclamation point equals. That exclamation point is the negation on the equal sign. And when we apply that, again, no change because those are three identical ways to not. So I don't know how many times I've said not today, but I'm kind of enjoying this. Not. Oh, wait, no. Can I not a not? All right. So we're going to show a couple more examples that are a little bit more complex. So first, we're going to look at what if you wanted to look at the current year and the previous year, and then everything else as I don't care, right? And so in this case, we're going to look to see for which years are 2022 or 2021. Those are our current and previous years. And we're just putting them together with an or between them. So this is one way of saying, hey, is this in one of these 2 years? And you'll notice those first 4 lines are true. And then the rest of them are false because the first 4 lines are 2021 and 2022. There's another way of doing this or. It's a little simpler way, and it's also a little more performant way. If you've ever looked or thought about, hey, why is this calculation so slow? This could be a partial solution to why your calculations are slow. This new this feature, the in function here, in one step, it'll look at your year and say, is it in one of these years that follows in the parentheses? So one reason why you might want to use this in is, again, like I mentioned, performance. But the reason that it's more performant, and that's another one of my favorite Tableau words. My old boss and I, we used to have fights about whether performant was a word or not. It totally is. So when you combine a whole bunch of conditions with an or, Tableau actually goes in and evaluates each statement and then only stops once it gets a match. So if you had year is 2021, or year is 2022, or year is 2023, all the way down, and you had some year that was not any of those conditions, it's going to go through one line at a time and see if something matches. With this in, it's just doing a straight comparison. Is this year in one of these values all at once? It's not looking at that field multiple times. So this in option should give us the exact same results as the or, and it does. One of the other nifty parts about this in is it also makes negation a little bit easier. So if we look at our final calculation on this page, we show here commented out a few different ways of putting a negation around an or statement, or the equivalent of an or statement. So that first example, which is commented out, is we just put not, and then in parentheses, we put whatever our combined or statement is. So not parentheses, years 2022 or years 2021. If you think about nots and ors like negatives, applying a negative in multiplication, or -1 in multiplication, we can also distribute the not. So in our next example, we apply the not directly to that comparison, and we turn the or into an and. And again, all of those are multiple lines, you got to make sure, do you have the parentheses or not? That last example, the one that we actually have live there, is the simplest of them all. Is the year in 2022 or 2021? Not. We put the not at the beginning of that, and that does that negation in one step. So not only is in more performant, it also can be way easier to read and troubleshoot and less potentially problematic. And we'll see here that it actually gives us the exact results we want as well. So all of those trues in that fourth example are now falses and vice versa. So that's cool, right?
Very.
And there's more. Not. All right.
All right. So my last example of the day is an example that comes directly from our higher education Slack group. So we had a person write in and ask for help troubleshooting calculation. And first I want to kind of familiarize you with the data set and what it looks like. So here we have 6 rows. These are all different subscribers for a journal, and some of them have invoice totals and some of them do not. So the question put to the Tableau higher ed user group was, why isn't this calculation working? So the calculation was saying, if the invoice total is equal to 0, then I want to set our journal status equal to canceled. Else, if the invoice is greater than 0, then set the journal status equal to active and paid. Else, if the invoice total is null, then set the journal status to unpaid. Else, nothing, end. All right, so why isn't this working? And the reason is it's a kind of redundant. In Tableau, you don't have to say, this is the name of the field and this is what it needs to be set to. Instead, this needs to appear as the title of the field, and then we just have the different settings based on the invoice total. I used to make this mistake a lot when I was first learning Tableau. And so this is the correct way to write that if-then statement. So if the invoice total equals 0, then canceled. What's canceled? The journal status. That's the name of our field. Else, if the invoice total is greater than 0, then active and paid. Else, if is null, then unpaid. End. That's it. All right, so when we add this to our viz, we can see that it is working correctly as expected. And if you need help with calculations or anything else in Tableau, then definitely join the higher ed Slack group, because that's what we're there for. And Roshni is going to wrap us up with one final example today.
All right, so it's kind of a long example because, you know, I'm very long-winded today. So there are a few different variations of if-then that you might find useful. The first one is going to be case when. So here we're looking at all of our terms like before, and we want to be able to identify regular terms, so spring and fall, versus the summer terms. And so we could do something like, if the term ends in 10, then spring. Else if the term ends in 20, then summer, and so on. But if all of your if and else if statements are comparing the same term to a list of values, then case is actually an easier option. So let's go ahead and look at what case looks like. So here, what case does is you first start by typing in case, and then follow it with the field that you want to evaluate. In our case, again, we're going to take the last 2 digits of our term code. We do have a calculated field somewhere in our data set that does this exact same thing, but you know, by the time we got here, we forgot. But we're always, all of these comparisons are going to use that same exact substring, that last 2 characters. And so we put in a whole bunch of whens. So when it's 10, then we're going to show spring, fall. When it's 20, then we're going to show summer, and so on, all the way down the line. And then we're going to put in an end, just like you do with any other if statement. One thing I really like to do is put in an else condition, so I can grab what happens if none of my terms actually matches something I expect. Oftentimes I'll put in something like error, like Ginny just did here, just to make sure that those cases that don't match stand out. I mean, nulls also stand out, and there's other things that you could use to make it stand out, but I tend to just, you know, want to blast error in my face, so I have some incentive to get rid of it and fix it. So yeah, so that is case. So now if we add this to our view, we should see that the first, all of the spring and summer fields, so the first 4 rows all say spring and fall, all say spring, fall, and then all the summer terms say summer, and that's exactly what we expect. But if you look back at this calculation that we still have open, you'll notice that there's a lot of redundancy in here. We've got summer and fall, both of those, both the 10 and 40 go to spring, and all of the 20 and 30s go to summer. And so there's a little bit of redundancy here. So another way to simplify this case or an if-then statement is IIF, which is if and only if. So let's start with the if then statement that we had earlier. So that's what we have commented out up at the very top, or actually the simplified version of what we had commented out at the very top there. So if the term ends in 20 or 30, then it's summer. Otherwise, it's spring, fall, and then your end. So the way if and only if works is pretty much the same format. So IIF, and then in parentheses, you start with what is the condition that you want to compare. So here we're looking at, are the last two digits 20 or 30? And then a comma. And then if that's true, then we're going to display summer, and then a comma. And if that's not true, aka if that's false, then we're going to display spring/fall. And so now when we go ahead and apply or add this to the view, we're going to get the exact same results as we did in our case statement. But it might be a little, simpler to read just because we're not having to duplicate those conditions a couple of times for, when we have 20 and 30. So that's it. If and only if we had more time, we would show you some more Tableau calculations, but alas, we have to wait for a future fun and fundamental session for that. So there we go. That is calculations for you all.
Our third and final installment will be next month at our July meeting.
What else is in our July meeting, Jenny?
That would be our 1 year HE Tugiversary.
Woo! Sorry, that was loud. It has been a whole year and we have this magical community. There's hundreds of you guys. I mean, we've consistently had over a couple of hundred people in all of our meetings. And it's amazing to us that, a few of us saying, hey, we should meet occasionally has turned into this. So I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, so definitely sign up for our 1 year HE Tugiversary on July 19th. We'll put the link in the chat for that. We're going to have our Meet a Community member with Andrew Drinkwater, our part 3 of measures to mention the Calcs Oh My, and also a special presentation by Julia Buching. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right.
I think it's Buchting.
Okay.
I can butcher German just like every other language.
I should be able to speak some German because that's where my ancestors are from, but alas, I cannot. So she will be presenting Can't See, Can't Touch, Hacks with Invisible Shapes, and I'm personally really excited about that. We would also like to invite you to fill out our survey and tell us what you thought of today's meeting, and also fill out our presenter's interest form and let us know if you'd like to present at a future HE Tug meeting. We are currently scheduling through the end of the year, and if you can't do it this year, we'll even consider next year. So let us know. We want to see everything. We want to have, representation from across all different kinds of institutions, all different kinds of departments. So please, anything that you think people would be interested in or benefit from, we definitely want to have you offer to present. So fill that out. Let us know.